Reviled, reclaimed, and respected the history of the word queer. Recently, several people have questioned or critiqued the use of the word queer to describe LGBTIQA plus folk. One writer of The Guardian claimed that the Q word was as derogatory and offensive as the N word and should not be used. While there is a clear history of the word being used aggressively and insultingly, the meanings and uses of queer have never been singular, simple, or stable. Queer is a word that of uncertain origin that entered the English language by the early 16th century, when it was primarily used to mean strange, odd, peculiar, or eccentric. By the late 19th century, it was being used colloquially to refer to same-sex attracted men. While this usage was frequently derogatory, queen was used in neutral and affirming ways, and I meant queer. In the 1960s and 70s, as sexual and gender minorities fought for civil rights and promoted new ways of being in society, we also saw new names for ourselves. Gay liberationists began to reclaim queer from its earlier hurtful usages, chanting out of the closets and into the streets, and singing, "We're here because we're queer." In Australia, camp was briefly the most common label that lesbians and gays used to describe themselves, before gay became more prominent, used at that time by both homosexual men and women. In the early 1990s, gay had come to be used more typically to refer to gay men. The language evolved to LGBTQ to recognize lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender people. From the early 2000s, it became more common to use queer as an umbrella term. Today, queer is included among the terms lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, gender diverse, intersex, asexual, brother boy, and sister girl. Now, I didn't know anything about brother boy and sister girl. That one just kind of cracked me up. I'm like, okay, so I'm looking at men going brother boy, and they're like, no, it's the opposite. So I'm like, okay, yet another thing I get wrong, and I learn so much when I come to report here at Queer News.
But you're a writer.
Understand my queerdom.
But you're a writer. You've studied the English language. Has this ever been a topic or something that you've explored further?
It actually hasn't, but I love listen, the way this story is put together is really quite sharp because it gives you everything from, you get the entire timeline. And I remember seeing, as I'm reading this and I'm kind of reporting, I'm going, yeah, I remember when we used to only say this. And then we started saying this other thing. And now all this other stuff is included. I'm like, now I'm just like the he, she, they, them. I'm so confused, but I just ask and say, what do you want to be called? And I'm good with whatever you want. So, inclusivity. That's all,
In comedy, I use queer a lot more than I do gay, because I feel that when I say gay, only gay men or, cis gay men and cis gay women would respond. Sometimes not even the women. Lesbians would be like, you didn't say lesbian. And I'm like, well, I'm asking if there's gay people here.
I just feel like when you say queer, though, I'm like, are we back in the 70s?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know.
For me, it's an umbrella term. It includes everyone. Although I don't love it because I think that before comedy, I saw queer as kind of like leftover from like British imperialism and, a lot of the homophobia around the world in the Middle East and Africa and wherever they had colonies everywhere. India is left over from Victoria times. It was learned from Victorian culture. And queer was the word that Victorians used to refer to us.
Oh, you queer?
Yeah, you're queer.
But then you come to the U.S. and you're like, you queer or something.
Yeah.
And so I'm just.
So I think it's great. I think it's just, taking back the word. I like using the word to refer to all of our community.
Okay.
It is a more inclusive
casual,
word. I think so. Right. Absolutely.
I think I'll admit I'm someone who's evolved on the term queer. When I was much younger, I lived in Georgia, outside of Atlanta. And to me, queer was often used in conjunction with the F word.
Yeah.
And that to me is why there is an equivalency of it's a hateful word. I also am totally against any kind of false equivalency. I think equating queer and the N word is a completely false equivalency.
False.
No, it's like
I'm as against that as I am people equivocating things to the Holocaust that are not the Holocaust.
Oh no.
So I want to put that out there, but my attitude towards queer has definitely evolved over the years. I do see it as an umbrella term. Heck, I work for an organization called the National LGBTQ Task Force. That is a mouthful.
Yeah.
You know, when I'm talking about our community broadly, queer is just a much easier umbrella term to use. And I do enjoy the rich history of it and the idea of it being something that represents all of us.
Yeah.
You know, words are power.
Yes.
Words are power. And so when you say you don't want to equivocate queer to the N-word or other things, I think if people want to take that back, then I'm all for it. Because, I mean, I can't imagine listening when I was in college to The Chronic or Public Enemy without, you know, the way they, the Snoop Dogg and Dre and all of them rapped and told their stories. And using that phrase and word, which I'm certainly not going to use, was part of the way they expressed themselves and what was happening in Compton and Long Beach and every other places around the world. So I think words are power, and if taking something back and re-empowers us, like I think taking the word queer back has re-empowered us, it's fine. Up next, my favorite word, just call us sodomites. We're here for it.
LGBTQ plus news is vital for our community and for the broader world as a whole. We have enough enemies at Fox News. Tucker, Sean, and Laura are loud. We need passionate allies. Happening Out Television Network, Queer News Tonight, and It's Happening Out are literally out of the closet and into the headlines. Our community needs your support. Like this broadcast and subscribe now to ensure the growth of the entire LGBTQ plus community.